When rumors started to circulate that two prominent love and hip-hop performers, Kirk Frost and Bambi, had been involved in an incident no fan could have ever imagined, the mood on set quickly became hostile. The two got into a furious disagreement that went beyond words and crossed a line that left the cast, crew, and spectators were astounded. Those who witnessed the situation said it felt more like a high-stakes movie scenario than reality TV. Members of the team were taken off surprise, their emotions running dangerously high. A few co-stars were stunned and stood still. Everybody grabbed their phones in an attempt to record the action in front of them. The excitement quickly swept throughout social media like wildfire. Rumors, fan pages, and blogs bombarded their feeds with mysterious captions and videos that all led back to the same query. Was this a genuine incident, or merely another well-planned camera stunt? What might have caused things to reach this breaking point, assuming it was real? Many fans think that Bambi and Kirk's long-standing animosity finally flared. However, the whole truth about this explosion, everyone is now keen to find out what this moment is. For the actors, it started off just like any other day of filming, the sort where cameras were being adjusted, lighting were illuminating the set with a pleasant glow, makeup artists were applying last-minute touch-ups, and the crew moved in a rhythmical pattern. However, if you listened carefully enough, you could tell that something wasn't right from the first second Bambi set foot on the floor. She walked at a purposeful pace. Her eyes were keen and scanning, as though she were getting ready for combat. She knew what was about to occur. Anyone who was tuned into the energy could tell that the air was heavier than normal, since the room's conversation decreased just enough, but not enough to be noticeable. In the middle of the set, Kirk Frost was... One of the producers was talking calmly and confidently in the middle of the convention. He spoke in a firm tone, but it seemed to falter as he looked across the room at Bambi's. There was only a slight flicker in his gaze, but it was plenty to know that something was approaching. They stared at one another for a moment too long. Everyone in the immediate vicinity first felt the unseen stream of tension that ignited between them, but it was so subtle that it was nearly imperceptible. Bambi strode forward, her expression inscrutable, and Kirk looked at her, still wearing that little smile he wore so frequently in stressful situations. On paper, her opening statement would have appeared to be a casual remark regarding something Kirk had previously said. But there was a sharp edge to her tone, like a silk-wrapped dagger. Kirk gave a level response, dismissing it as a miscommunication. Bambi, however, didn't believe it. The first exchanges were measured and calculated, similar to chess. Moves with each side sensing the other person. However, the constraint was short-lived. In a few minutes, with harsher phrases and wider gestures, Bambi's voice increased. Then she began to mention prior instances. There were times when she said Kirk had subtly but purposefully insulted her or undermined her. Private talks that had found their way back to her were discussed. She said that Kirk had said things to other actors that portrayed her negatively. For his part, Kirk refused to back down. He categorically disputed the most grave charges. Additionally, for others, he recounted what happened, claiming Bambi was lying. He said that she was exaggerating little matters and creating drama out of nothing. However, if his intention was to defuse the situation, it was failing. Every rejection seemed to strengthen Bambi's resolve to resist. The scene was not overlooked. While feigning to check their phones or adjust their attire, cast members who had been in other areas of the set crept closer, their gazes still fixed on the drama that was developing. With his arms crossed, Scrappy, who had a history with both, stood a few steps away, keeping a careful eye on proceedings and prepared to intervene if necessary. The producers had a private discussion in the corner about whether to step in and maintain order or let the camera to document what was rapidly turning into the type of unscriptable reality TV gold. The tone of Bambi's voice changed from one of rage to one of pure hurt. She charged Kirk with purposefully causing difficulties and sowing seeds, significant skepticism regarding her among others. As he undermined her behind her back, she said he had been grinning in her face. Although Kirk's expression remained calm, his jaw was tense, which showed how frustrated he was. Kirk's voice was more clipped and colder when he eventually spoke again. Bambi was creating a scene that would only make her seem terrible when the show aired, he informed her, and she was humiliating herself. That phrase struck she's as good as dry wood. She moved forward, bringing them closer together as her voice rose once more. It was loud enough this time for everyone on the set to hear without strain. She claimed that because she was at least being honest, she wasn't scared of how she seemed on television. The crew moved, uncomfortably. To avoid missing a word, a boom mic operator shifted positions. The stylist in the corner paused in the middle, holding a stack of garments. That group tightness in the room was palpable. The way individuals lean in as they anticipate a significant event. As though to indicate that he didn't want things to go any farther, Kirk raised his hand a little, palms out. His eyes, however, sent a different message. This was not a surrender. This was a calculated, move. He mumbled something so softly that most people couldn't hear it. However, Bambi's response was rather telling. Her eyes briefly opened before narrowing into a look that might have instantly sliced through glass. She moved closer once again, getting so close that the air between them was electrifying. The intensity remained the same, but her voice faltered. She informed him that she had received months' worth of warnings about him, advised that he couldn't be relied upon, that he was taking sides in every dispute. She acknowledged that she had decided to overlook it out of deference to the individuals they knew and their shared past. However, she suddenly felt foolish for assuming such about him. Kirk shook his head slowly in answer, then with a remark on how individuals like manipulating the story to make themselves appear to be the victim. He hardly finished speaking when Bambi retaliated. Her voice was practically shaking, but not from fear, but rather from the weight of everything she had been suppressing. She mentioned a recent incident with a different cast member, suggesting that she thought Kirk was involved in some dubious activities. At this point, the focus moved, from verbal sparring to something far riskier. As a precaution, a crew member pushed a chair out of the path. Among the producers, as if mentally bracing for the prospect of having to physically separate them, he took a half step forward, his gaze flitting between them. Now that the air was heavy, everything moved slowly, purposeful, with an unyielding arm. Bambi pointed straight at Kirk and said she was done, as if the room itself were holding its breath. The games are over. The phony grins are over. I'm done acting. It was all okay. There was a tone in her voice, that finality, the sort that left the impact of her comments felt even by people who were unaware of the whole history. Although Kirk's look remained unwavering, his silence during that particular moment was more powerful than any words he could have spoken. Now the tension was alive, throbbing between them, and everyone in attendance was aware that whatever transpired next might turn this contentious dispute into a topic of discussion for many seasons to come. The quiet between them seemed to be stretched so thinly that it may break at any moment. The standoff was the focus of every eye in the room. There were a few hushed conversations as the background actors tried to figure out what they were, observing, without attracting any notice. The camera operators were still, their faces fixed firmly by the lenses. Bambi's breathing was more rapid now, her shoulders lifting and falling with each breath, knowing that this was the type of film that producers battled over. She gazed at Kirk as if she were looking for some indication of regret, any clue that he may pull away from the brink. Kirk, however, did not recoil. If anything, his silence seemed provocative, as if he were asking her to initiate contact. Then, in a voice that barely carried, Kirk muttered something that caused the room's temperature to drop, loud enough to be heard clearly, but not loud enough to be interpreted as yelling. He informed her that she wasn't as crucial to the program, or to those in their immediate vicinity, as she liked to think. It was a subtle insult that had the kind of impact that only a well-timed remark could have. The onlookers let out a collective gasp. In a low voice, one of the stylists said, "Oh, no," under her breath. Although Bambi's face remained still, her tense jaw and the way her wrists flexed at her sides indicated to everyone that she had just attained a breaking point. "Breaking point," she said as she moved closer, reducing the distance between them to just a few inches. Her tone came out softly but with rage in it. She brought to Kirk's memory the occasions she had stood up for him when others had questioned his commitment. She mentioned the nights when rumors and gossip threatened to tarnish his reputation, she had defended him. She then claimed that this was his way of repaying her by undermining her value in front of the whole crew. Wait, his face tensing up. Although he didn't retreat, his gaze quickly shifted in the direction of the cameras as though he realized that every motion and word was being recorded. He advised her that she was allowing her feelings to overshadow the situation and that she was overreacting. However, before he could complete, he was interrupted by Bambi, whose voice rose to a pitch that reverberated off the walls of the studio. She accused him of concealing himself behind well-chosen phrases and of constantly manipulating the story to make himself appear reasonable. Scrappy, who had been silently observing from a few feet away, eventually stepped forward them as the others seemed unsteady. Despite his calm, even informal tone, there was a warning in it. He advised them both to calm down before things went too far, and they were unable to turn back. Bambi, however, hardly looked in his way. Her gaze remained fixed on Kirk. Once more, everyone in the room was holding their breath. Kirk backed off a little, but not far enough to be a retreat. It was more akin to shifting positions during combat. He claimed to have had enough of the dramatics and the allegations. Nothing he said would convince her otherwise if she decided to think the worst of him. At that point, Bambi's voice broke in, but not out of melancholy, because of the overwhelming weight of all she had been suppressing. She mentioned the majority of the crew was unaware of the off-camera encounter. One instance concerned a private discussion Kirk had with a close friend or relative. The crowd was shaken by the revelation. People looked at one another, with some shaking their heads and others obviously attempting to recall if they had heard anything consistent with her statements. Kirk's reaction was prompt. He categorically denied it, yet his denial was so fast that it seemed almost defensive. Its pace didn't support his argument. Bambi bent nearer, her eyes narrowed, and her voice became so intense that everyone had to pay closer attention. She assured him that she had evidence in the form of witnesses, communications, and details that would leave no uncertainty about his actions. The mood changed as soon as she said those words. The staff was aware of that. Proof was the type of word that could alter the plot of a whole season of reality TV. A producer made a subtle motion for a camera to get closer, being aware that they were about to something explosive. Kirk's mouth tightened. Why? He asked her. If she really had evidence that she hadn't ambushed him in public, but rather had delivered it to him in private. It wasn't a joke, but Bambi laughed. It was frigid and harsh. She admitted to him that she had previously attempted to resolve matters in private, but he always managed to turn the tables on her. She claimed that this time she wanted the truth to be visible to everyone. Now the audience was waiting for every word. Like moths to a flame, even those who weren't directly participating in the program but were on set for other reasons had found themselves edging closer. A makeup artist paused in the middle of packing up her bag, her brush still in hand, her gaze fixed on the scenario unfolding a few feet away. Kirk inhaled deeply, his face changing from irritated to a more composed one. He informed her that she was making a grave error, and that conflicts in public such as this never worked out well for anybody. However, before he could continue, Bambi took the initiative and did something unexpected. She took her phone out of her bag and held it up as if she was about to swipe through it and show everyone what she had been talking about. In an instant, the room's tension turned to electric charge. Everyone froze, their gazes darting from Bambi's face to the phone she was holding. Kirk's face grew serious. He informed her that she was going to open a door that she was unable to lock and that she had no idea what she was toying with. It briefly appeared as though she may really go through, retrieve the texts, let the world see by turning the screen in the direction of the cameras. The air was so heavy with expectancy that you could practically feel her thumb pressing against your skin as it hovered just over the screen. Then something changed. Perhaps it was Kirk's expression. Perhaps it was the startling realization that, once it was broadcast, this moment would follow her forever. Bambi, however, paused. Even though the delay was short, Kirk managed to move forward a little. His voice lowered to a warning tone as he advised her to use extreme caution. Regarding her actions, the tension persisted despite the reluctance. It only produced. It is more angular. The team sensed that this was far from done, regardless of what came next. Not even close. Bambi's breathing was deep yet slow, and her thumb was still hovering over the phone screen. The space appeared to be frozen in time. Every sound, even the quiet whir of a camera lens changing focus, the muffled cough of someone in the back, and the faint hum of the overhead lights, was intensified. Kirk's gaze. His jaw muscles twitched just a little in that motionless instant, his eyes fixed on hers, steady yet strained. In an attempt to intervene, one of the producers moved carefully in between them. With his hands extended, palms facing, "Out!" He spoke in a cool, collected voice about maintaining professionalism and keeping in mind that this was still a set. However, his voice was hardly audible. Bambi avoided eye contact with him. Kirk didn't either. Silent discussion was the only thing taking place. An implicit struggle of wills between two individuals who had both resolved not to blink first. Then, with a thunderclap, Bambi broke the tension by saying something so blunt. Some folks flinched physically. For the sake of truth, she assured Kirk that she would destroy all they owned if he didn't think so. Then, he was not as familiar with her as he had said. The remarks were piercing, a purposeful blow. Kirk stepped forward, reducing the distance between them. His voice became little more than a whisper, a deep rumbling. However, it strangely permeated the whole space. She wasn't simply jeopardizing their relationship or their reputations, he assured her. She didn't even understand she was playing with fire, which might burn everybody in its path. Bambi squinted her eyes. Instead of just delivering the truth, she said he was trying to scare her by hiding behind ambiguous warnings. Kirk's eyes remained fixed, but something her remarks seemed to have struck home because of the tension in his face. Scrappy shuffled uneasily from the sidelines. He was obviously considering whether to jump in again as he glanced from Bambi to Kirk. He had witnessed enough reality TV explosions to know when amusement was ready to give way to something unvarnished and hazardous. However, Bambi opened her phone and began scrolling before he could move. In the quiet, the sound of her finger moving across the glass was deafening. As they waited for the screen to be turned outward, everyone was leaning in and watching, her expression and Kirk's. Kirk's hand went out before she could display anything, but it was to gently push her phone back toward her rather than to take it. It was forceful enough to convey a message, but not harsh. Silently but firmly, he warned her that she would regret revealing anything before fully understanding the situation. The truth was more nuanced than she had thought, not because he would make her regret it. This provided her hesitation. She didn't expect him to say that. The room appeared to change. Once more, the hostility was replaced with an odd, nervous fascination. Bambi studied him, tilting her head. She directly asked him what he meant. Kirk looked from her to the cameras and back again. He claimed that she was unaware of what was going on behind the scenes, roughly. In her opinion, alliances, agreements, and discussions had nothing to do with loyalty or treachery. He asserted that if he gave an explanation, it would include others who were unrelated to their own problems. Bambi let out a piercing little chuckle that betrayed her incredulity. She informed him that he had previously said similar things, never specific enough to cause her to reconsider, but always just ambiguous enough to cause her to question herself. This time she declared she wasn't going to fall for it. Tension began to rise once more. Kirk's expression darkened as he warned her that there would be no turning back once she reached a certain threshold. Wasn't dangerous. It was simply the way things were. He advised her to use caution while she was prepared to burn bridges. As the emotions swirled, Bambi's respiration increased once more as her chest rose and fell. Perhaps some bridges needed to burn, she remarked. Perhaps the entire set needed to witness his true self away from the cameras. For the first time, Kirk lost his cool at that point. His voice raised in a way that communicated heat, but not in a complete yell. He accused her of distorting the facts and allowing rumors and half-truths to influence her decisions. The staff responded immediately. A few folks let out a gasp. A cosmetics artist put her brush down too firmly. It rang out with a metallic clink against the table. Bambi refused to give up. Her voice lowered to something menacing, and she took a little step closer. She said that the only rumors she heard were receipts. Just enough to remind him of what she had, she raised her phone a little further. At last, Scrappy intervened and planted between them himself. He told them both to stop before the situation became something they couldn't leave behind in a stern, yet low voice. Cameras were rolling, he reminded them, and fans would take this and turn it into something greater than any of